of offences when compared to the total number of offences which I showed to the House before. So I think there is going to have to be some serious consideration of all of these factors and not just get bound up with the hype around looking like one is tough on crime. If one really wants to be tough on crime, then the Alcohol Law Reform Bill is the one to use.
I call the Honourable Member Materia Ture. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. The Green Party has always supported the integrity of the legal system and worked very hard to improve it. We have more than a decade of history here, standing often in contravention, the contrary position to many of the other political parties because of our commitment to a principled and genuinely just legal system. We have worked very hard and opposed infringements on citizens' rights, their right and any attacks on the central tenets of the legal system. Citizens' rights and their human rights are paramount. The right to a fair trial, the right to representation, whether you are rich or poor, the right to be treated as though you are innocent until you are proven to be guilty. And we have had in this House over a number of years many erosions and attempted erosions of these central tenets of our legal system. There was an attack on the right to be present at your own trial under this national government. We've had continual attacks on legal aid, rendering it very difficult for those who are on low incomes to get adequate and proper legal representation, leaving the justice system, the legal system, accessible by the rich and not so much by the poor. And we have had erosions of the principle that a person is innocent until proven guilty. And that part of that erosion has already writ into the bail laws. This legislation extends that erosion and continues that process of erosion by extending the reverse onus of the burden of proof. We oppose it for that reason. What we await in Select Committee is the analysis that proves that this erosion is both necessary for public safety, that is, that it will actually create a safer environment that is identifiable and quantifiable, and that it is the only alternative to legislative change to enable the protection of public safety. We are not convinced by this legislation or by the explanation for it. We also consider that this legislation is a political statement about the legal system, not a principled one and not one based on justice. The Green Party acknowledges the reoffending rates and the issues with bail and the implications when bail is wrongly given for the community. There have been some very serious and terrible cases where New Zealanders have lost their lives, and they are tragedies for the families and for the communities, for the judges who make those decisions that have led to that action, for the whole of the country when the legal system fails individuals and their families. There is no doubt about that, or the hardship and the tragedy that is part of that. But we also know that the system does have its flaws, and that not all bail decisions are being made rightly, and that not all of the legislative options for providing judges with what they need to make these decisions and the systems to make sure that people don't reoffend are put in place. That also needs to be part of the discussion around what you do with bail, rather than just this very political act that is set out in this legislation. It certainly isn't clear that judges have all of the powers that they need to make the best decisions. We also know that New Zealand has one of the highest custodial rates in the Western world, higher than Australia, the UK, Wales. We know that the existing system also has an element of racism in it. So while 6% of the prison population of Māori who has to face a conviction are imprisoned, 11% are remanded in custody. And there is a direct relationship between the extent to which Māori are convicted, imprisoned and remanded in custody at a rate significantly higher than that of the Pākehā population that has never been properly addressed by any government or any Minister of Justice, and continues to be an open wound in New Zealand society. There are parts of this system that need to be fixed. This bill is a very blunt tool. It's not yet proven whether it will fix any of them. There is virtually no support for defendants who are released on bail. So the current system mostly uses reporting and curfews, and yes, they are used to control and monitor defendants who are on bail. And somewhere there have been failures in the reporting and curfew and the monitoring of defendants. There have been serious tragedies, and New Zealanders have lost their lives as a result. But at the same time, we can identify those very tragic cases, but there are also those other cases of the opportunistic crime that occurs, the crime that arises out of, people getting bail and being involved in stupid stuff where they do stupid things because there's no support around them to stop it. Things like the stupid burglaries that occur, the alcohol-fuelled bad behaviour, whether it's violence or other kinds of crime, the drug-fuelled violence and other kinds of crime, the crime that arises out of poverty, the crime that arises out of insecure and unstable housing where people have got nowhere to go, so they're behaving in really negative and bad ways that cause harm and crime in the community. But none of those, we don't have sufficient processes or systems in this country to make sure that people, even for just around alcohol and drug treatment, get that when they are remanded on bail to help prevent them from reoffending. Now, the question here for the Greens is, how do we prevent crime from being committed? That is the question that needs to be answered in any consideration of law that is concerns the legal system or the justice system. How do we stop crimes from being committed in the first place? And where they are committed, how do we stop further crimes from being committed? And it involves a range of things. Some of them are very punitive. Some of them do require a person to remain in custody, which is the most punitive thing that the legal system can do. Some of them are not punitive, like alcohol and drug treatment, like anti-violence programs and support for families, like making sure that across the board New Zealanders have access to a decent job and a decent house. Those things aren't punitive, but they are mechanisms by which we reduce crime. They are ways to stop crime from being committed and therefore keeping our people safer in the short and in the long term. That has got to be the purpose of the legal system and the justice system. So, Mr Speaker, just finally, the Green Party does take this issue very seriously, and at Select Committee we will be looking for all of the mechanisms that are available in the law, to help prevent the harm caused by crimes committed while a person is on bail, making sure that judges have the powers, that they do genuinely have the powers that they need, and where they don't, where there are some gaps, that those gaps are filled. That we look for the support for other ways of preventing offending on bail, such as some of the community restorative justice programs and things that I've been talking about previously. Like Labor, we are not convinced that this is the right measure to take to deal with the problem, and we will be looking for those alternatives in Select Committee. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Call Jamie Lee Ross.